amendment, already a done deal. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much for that. So, in order to agree to suspending standing orders and have a new amendment added onto the agenda, which would be Amendment 7, we would need a 2/3 majority. So, therefore, I'm just going to let the online vote get opened, and then I'll come back to you in a moment, Rim. Apologies about that. Okay, could I please see all cards in favour of suspending standing orders? Thank you very much. And can I see all those against? Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to wait for the online vote to catch up. Just to keep myself entertained, can I see all those in favour of the standing order suspension? Put your hands up. And those against? Thank you very much. Thank you. That is not a 2/3 majority, so that has not failed. Okay, so let's move on with the business. Okie dokie, could I please ask Katie Vigar to stand by, and I now call Layla Moran, the MP for Oxford West and Abingdon, to move the motion.
Thank you, Conference. It is so good to be here presenting our For a Fair Deal policy paper. A paper which will form the basis of our manifesto and that we will be campaigning on in a general election. And Conference, after this shower of an excuse of a Tory government, doesn't Britain need a general election now? Now, nothing in this country seems to be working anymore. When one tries to imagine the perfect visual metaphor to sum up years of Conservative neglect, frankly, we are now spoiled for choice. Is it the clinking suitcases wheeled into number 10 for an illegal party, while our elderly were left to die in care homes? Is it the sewage pouring into our seas and rivers, poisoning our children, and, I'm afraid in the case of a friend of mine, literally killing our pets? Or is it the roofs of schools crumbling on the heads of our children? Judge us by our record, one minister said the other day. Oh, you'd better believe we will. After years of Conservative neglect, that social contract, that fair deal between people and their government has now been shattered. And that human cost is heartbreaking. I visited a food bank in Abingdon last week and I met a working mum, Judy, a teaching assistant. She bounced a 6-month-old on her knee as her 11-year-old daughter stood in the corner watching us. She was there with us on a Friday, by the way, because her school had suspected RAC. Judy and her husband both work, but the rising living costs, and especially the cost of childcare, meant she was actively considering if she can afford to continue that job that she loves. She teared up, telling me that she felt she was doing everything right, that she was being told to do what she should do, and she was doing that, and it still was not enough. And then she told me of her shame in coming to the food bank for the first time, but now that she doesn't know what she'd do without it. Judy's story, sadly, right now, is our nation's story. Millions of people trying their hardest, barely getting by. But I'll tell you what, there is only one person in that story who I think should feel any shame, and it's not Judy. It's Rishi Sunak and his out-of-touch Conservative Party. Conference, you and I know that a change in government alone is not enough. The prospect of replacing an incompetent one with an unambitious one, I don't know about you, but it leaves me completely cold. No, Conference. Liberal Democrats have a better vision. We want to renew and deliver that fair deal for the British people, a fair deal that will give everyone the power to make the most of their potential and real freedom to decide how they want to live their lives. That's a liberal fair deal. And delivering that fair deal means delivering on 5 things. So let me briefly take you through them. First and foremost, it's about growing the economy fairly, delivering prosperity to families across the country, building a Britain fit for the next 30 years, driven by small businesses, green power, and new technologies, and underpinned by innovation, education, and opportunity for all. But we are clear. We cannot secure that prosperity without removing the permanent drag anchor on our economy, and that is the Conservatives' botched deal with Europe. We will fix our broken relationship immediately, forge a new partnership based on cooperation, not confrontation, and move to conclude a new comprehensive agreement which removes as many barriers to trade as possible. In this pre-manifesto, we reaffirm our commitment to our 4-stage roadmap, and I'm sure you know it all off by heart, but let me take you through it. We will begin by taking initial unilateral steps to mitigate the damage of the deal, followed by confidence-boosting measures such as joining Erasmus+. Then, we will deepen our trade relationships with measures like a veterinary agreement. And finally, once the ties of trust have been restored, we would aim to place the UK-EU relationship on a more formal basis by seeking to join the single market. It was there all along. And all these measures will help to restore the British economy and prosperity and opportunity to its citizens, and are also essential steps on the road to EU membership, which remains our longer-term objective. Now, Conference, we are pragmatists, and we know that this may take some time. But we are also internationalists who believe in free trade and support to our fishermen, farmers, small businesses that have been so badly let down. And that is why we are the only party left that can be credibly trusted with the economy. But growing the economy is not enough to secure that fair deal that we need. Liberals have always recognized this. It's why in the 20th century, Liberals introduced the state pension and redistributive taxation. It's why Beveridge set out that vision of the welfare state and for the National Health Service. And it's why, when we were in government, we insisted on the introduction of free school meals. So in this paper, we outline where we want to take that liberal story next, proposing to give children the best start in life by putting a dedicated mental health professional in every school. We'll invest in the NHS, giving everyone a new right to see their GP within 7 days, recruiting the doctors needed to do it, not antagonize them as this government does. And we will repair the broken benefits safety net, setting an ambitious target to end deep poverty within a decade. This is a true liberal tradition, and that fair access to good public services and a strong social safety net is the second aspect of this deal. Third, the Liberal Democrats have always been the party that has led the way on the climate crisis. And while the Conservatives backslide, we show leadership. While they dither on whether they want to deliver net zero at all, we will deliver it by 2045. Because when we looked at those protesting students and looked them in the eyes and said, we also believe there is no planet B, we actually meant it. Conference. Aren't we also just sick of all the poo? And we've got measures to deal with that too. The fourth part of our fair deal speaks to our internationalism, our plan for a strong United Kingdom playing its part in a fair international order. And of course, at the heart of that vision, as I've already said, is rebuilding that relationship with Europe, not least because we need to work lockstep with our neighbours as we stand firm against the barbarous Russian invasion of Ukraine. I believe that internationalism is key to our party's success, but it is also key to our distinctiveness. Because it was Liberal Democrats, remember, who enshrined 0.7% of national income in law for international aid. And because of the Conservative government, there are now millions of people, vulnerable people, across the world who, frankly, have perished. I'm afraid to say, though, Conference, it's not just the Conservative Party now. It's Labour, too. Shame on them both. The Liberal Democrats now stand alone. We are the only major political party committed to immediately reversing that aid cut and restoring the UK's proud reputation as a development superpower. And last, but certainly not least, there is one other area where the Liberal vision stands apart from anywhere else. We are the reformers. We always have been, and we always will be. We do not look at the state of politics and think, good enough. No, Conference. Liberal Democrats look at the state of politics and know what the voters also know, that it is fundamentally broken. People up and down this country feel voiceless, and only the Liberal Democrats have a plan to bring back power to the people, making every vote count and introducing proportional representation. So there you have it, Conference. 5 strands that weave together to make a stronger United Kingdom. I am so proud of this fair deal that we propose in this pre-manifesto. Thank you to every single person who contributed to it and that will speak today. It has been a colossal team effort and is but the springboard to the mammoth task of the full manifesto that is yet to come. So I commend this paper to you today, along with all the amendments tabled by party members. I support them all. We know that as we approach this general election, we can do so with confidence, because we know how transformative this Liberal fair deal would be. We know that it is truly worth fighting for, and that we know by electing Liberal Democrat MPs across the country, we can deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Layla. Could I please ask John Ball to stand by, and I now call Katie Vigar from Chippenham to move Amendment 1.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first speech to party conference, although I attended my first, a gathering of Social Democrats in Salford in 1983. Some of you may have been there too. It's taken me 40 years to say something, but I'm here now. I'm at the stage where I realise if I don't step up, I might slow down, which brings me to the crisis in our environment, the subject of this amendment. We know we need to step up our response. We know that the impact of climate change is with us and will get worse, that the crisis in our natural world is also catastrophic and threatens our human existence too. As over the summer we saw wildfires, heat waves, flooding and storms around the world, tragically taking thousands of lives, I genuinely thought that finally political leaders would now step up. But last week we saw a shameful decision, dishonestly framed, taken by a desperate Prime Minister to abandon a series of green policies because he thinks that creating a political fight on this will win him votes. Earlier this year, the Labour Party delayed its green economic plan. While others are stepping back, we must stand all the stronger by our policies to tackle the climate and ecological emergencies. We are adding to them this week. The point of this amendment is to bring that sense of urgency to this important motion, and thank you, Layla, for saying that you support it. The policy paper says that we place tackling the climate crisis at the centre of our policies, so let's get that into the motion. It must be at the heart of our whole agenda, and we must say so. Second, we are an internationalist party, so let's get that deeply held commitment to working with other countries into the motion. We should be helping to lead the world's response, and so both parts of this amendment add global to the text. Finally, I wanted to move this amendment because I want us to campaign on it. If combating these emergencies is at the heart of our agenda, we need to share that with people. In this terrible cost of living crisis and with our public services struggling, of course it's not always the top concern for people day to day, but they haven't lost interest, although without leadership they might lose hope. Faced with such an enormous problem, with solutions that can feel distant and complex, people want politicians who lead opinion and offer hope. People know we must act, so politicians must show that while our climate and natural world will change, we can slow that change, begin to reverse it, and do so affordably. So it isn't about what resonates, but about what is right. And in fact, action on the climate is both. Polling this year shows that around 2/3 of UK citizens do worry about climate change. So let's be proud of our policies and explain them. That way we won't only gain support, we will win trust. So as Liberal Democrats, we should do all in our power before, during and after the election to ensure that the next government is the government that finally steps up to the challenge. I ask you to pass this amendment to show how seriously we take this and the whole motion, and then let's campaign on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask George Cunningham to stand by, and I now call Councillor John Ball from Ealing to move Amendment 2.
Thank you, Nick. Fellow Liberal Democrats, it is a fundamental principle that those who make the laws under which we live require a democratic mandate to do so. While Dick Newby and his team do heroic work in the House of Lords, it's simply not acceptable in the 21st century to retain a Chamber of Parliament that's appointed based on a combination of patronage and accident of birth. It's also a topical issue. Boris Johnson appointed a series of controversial peers, from Lebedev to Johnson's own Partygate pals. Liz Truss is embroiled in a row over her resignation honours that's lasted longer than her premiership did. And of course, the Mid-Beds by-election, which I'm sure we're all going to help in and we're fighting hard to win, was caused by Nadine Dorries being miffed that her promised peerage was blocked. House of Lords reform is not a revolutionary new idea. We've had similar policies in successive general election manifestos since at least 2010, so we should not backslide on it in our next manifesto. And opinion polls consistently show around 2/3 support for at least some elected elements, so it's a popular policy. And reform of the House of Lords is important enough to be featured in our manifesto. The motion proposes electing councillors by PR. As a Lib Dem councillor for the last 20 years, I strongly welcome that. But surely how members of one of our parliamentary chambers gain their seats is just as important as how we councillors gain our seats. Last year, even Keir Starmer, hardly a lefty firebrand, pledged to abolish the House of Lords and replace it with a new elected chamber to restore trust in politics. Can I ask you a question, Conference? Do you want to fight a general election on a manifesto that's more constitutionally timid than Keir Starmer? If not, you need to vote for Amendment 2. The amendment's a modest proposal. It's not prescriptive. It's inclusive of a fully elected upper house, but does not require it. I personally think that the upper chamber should be entirely directly elected, but our amendment covers both that position and also the less purist views that there should be a retained element of expertise or a system of indirect election. Finally, have a think about our position in the world. The UK is alone in Europe in having a wholly unelected revising chamber, and the hereditary element is found only in the UK and one other country in the world, Lesotho. So, Conference, please vote for the motion and for Amendment 2 so that we have a constitutional reform policy at the heart of our manifesto that doesn't miss the elephant in the room of a democratically indefensible chamber of government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Michael Berwick-Gooding to stand by, and I now call George Cunningham from Lib Dems Overseas to move Amendment 3.
Dear Conference, great to be with you today. I'm speaking on behalf of the Federal International Relations Committee in favour of us having in the manifesto the commitment to have a comprehensive UK strategy to challenge regimes such as led by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, in China. Conference. Chinese President Xi told President Putin in March this year, as Ukraine war is raging, right now, he said, there are changes, the likes of which we have not seen for 100 years. And we, China and Russia, are leading on it, leading the world on it. Conference. Repressive regimes such as China's under the CCP, Russia, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia and others are linking up. Democracies around the world are being subverted. War is raging in Ukraine. China and Russia are in cahoots together, in particular, enlisting many developing countries to their cause through their disinformation and misinformation campaigns. Back in 2019, the European Commission was already calling China a systemic rival. This summer, President Xi's intentions became even clearer when he boycotted the G20 summit in favor of starting to evolve an alternative economic system in challenge to the one we have at the BRICS summit, and by attending the G77 summit of developing countries to enlist them to his cause. China has many new initiatives. It's called Global Development Initiative, a Security Initiative, and a Civilization Initiative. In those, China claims that the development model should be shorn of human rights, and that is much more suitable for developing countries. It says Western military alliances are a threat to world peace, and it also says, China also says wrongly, criticizing the Chinese Communist Party is a racist assault on Chinese culture and people. As many authoritarian governments grow wealthier and the West's economic interests weaken, or clout weakens, an urgent new approach is needed for the post-Western global order for human rights and the rule of law to remain centre stage. Conference, this party believes that the UK must always stand on the side of democracy, human rights, international law and multilateralism. First of all, we need to fix our own societies. Western democracies are increasingly seen as decadent, in decline, messy and slow. We need to reform our institutions and become the role model we used to be for everyone. It is a massive task, given the difficult state our country is in. Secondly, we have to face and deal with the realities of political power in the world as it's evolving. We need to work out the right balance between principles, values and interests. We must be seen to be consistent in the application of those across the world. We need to use more persuasion to win over our partners. And thirdly, we need to embrace and win back the global south, all those developing countries that have now hesitating which camp they should be in. We must cut the rhetoric and have them as real partners. Many of them say they want truly open markets for their goods. They need investment, especially in infrastructure, processing their raw materials and skills transfer. We should be working with them to do that. Conference, the UK government has been criticised by numerous parliamentary committees, including most recently by the UK Intelligence and Security Committee for having no strategy on China. This country, indeed our party, needs a new approach. It needs to fit in with our place in the world and to propose and to promote our vision of the changing world order and what we'd like to see in it. So this amendment calls for a comprehensive UK strategy to challenge such regimes based on our values, respect for human rights and rule of law, and which should be aligned with our European partners. It's only
Please
right
draw
that
your
the
remarks
Liberal
to a
Democrat
close.
Party, as the torchbearer of human rights, should lead the way. Thank you so much, Conference. Support the amendment.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Jamie Stone to stand by, and I'll call Michael Berwick-Gooding from Basingstoke and Dean, who's moving Amendment 4.
Good afternoon, Conference. The pre-manifesto policy paper for a fair deal has many good policies, and the amendments just make some excellent changes to the policies as set out in the paper. I'm disappointed that this motion lacks the detail that the motion which was tabled for last autumn's conference had to accompany the earlier draft of the pre-manifesto. That motion was full of our policies, but this current motion includes few specific policies and instead sets out our wider policy aims. This amendment does not add policies which are missing from the policy paper. They are at the top of page 47. I don't understand why this was not taken as a drafting amendment. I am very happy that Layla, when moving this motion, accepted all 6 amendments. When the commitment to spending 0.7% of national income was cut to 0.5, 4 billion was slashed from aid spending. This meant aid to 102 territories. Support now only goes to 34 territories, and most of them are receiving less support. In 2021, spending in South Sudan was reduced by just over 38%. In Yemen, it was reduced by just over 48%, and in Syria by nearly half. In August, the chair of the International Development Committee, Sarah Champion MP, said evidence submitted to the committee over the last few years told us the cuts to UK ODA would take a human toll. But this astonishing honest assessment of the real impact makes grim reading. It is a litany of the people living in poverty, suffering hunger, women, girls, disabled people who will no longer be supported by the UK's direct aid spending and the consequences they will face. This includes hundreds of thousands more women once again facing unsafe abortions, and thousands may die in pregnancy and childbirth. In the preamble to our Constitution, we state no one should be enslaved by poverty. This is because as Liberals, we know that someone living in poverty can't be as free as someone who isn't. For us, this not only applies to everybody in the UK, this applies to everybody in the world. The aim of the Department for International Development was to promote sustainable development and eliminate world poverty. As Liberals, how can we not support there being such a department? Last year, the Independent Commission for Aid Impact, in her damning report, stated that as well as experienced staff being lost when the department was swallowed up by the Foreign Office and DFID was abolished, there has been a dramatic loss of transparency. The Foreign Office also failed to set a budget that financial year. As a result, the ability of Parliament and civil society to hold the government to account and the UK reputation as a global leader on aid transparency is being lost. The UK has lost its reputation as an international development superpower because of these 2 cuts. We have supported the 7.7% gross national income target for over 50 years. And it is therefore important that this is included in this motion, along with the re-establishing of the Department of International Development, especially as Labour are backing away from them. Please vote for this amendment and the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Ruth Gripper to stand by, and I now call Jamie Stone, who's our spokesperson for Culture, Media and Sport, to move Amendment 5.
Conference, holding down the job of, in the Commons, of being the spokesman for Culture, Media and Sport, I want to just say a very few words about protecting our independent, publicly owned public service broadcasters. I'm talking about the BBC, Channel 4, S4C and BBC Alaba in Scotland. We know that they have a responsibility to inform, to educate and to entertain. And ultimately that is to the great benefit of the public and this country. And they must be at all costs protected. We need, for the sake of our creative industries, these independently owned public sector broadcasters, because they can encourage and nourish homegrown entertainment and arts. And if we're going to keep our own product and not be taken over by the US, then these organizations are absolutely invaluable. They're impartial. They sometimes annoy all of us in political parties. I bear the scars from in the past of being ticked off or called to account on local radio or on telly, but that is the nature of democracy. And that's something that makes us different from so many, many other countries. And I think it's something hugely, hugely important. In terms of what they commission, places like my constituency in the Highlands, remote parts of the UK, all over, they actually go out there and they get small businesses, medium-sized businesses, to actually make stuff. And that is really, really good for the local economies. I'm glad that the government changed its mind on privatising Channel 4. It's gone away for now, but who knows? Herself, Nadine Dorris, the architect of this mad plan, is gone, but it may come back, so we must be constantly vigilant, and we all know about the threat over the licence fee. I think we owe it to the public to protect these vital organisations that make us so uniquely British, and I think in terms of local and national democracy are vital. And finally, I end with this. My old mum came through the Blitz in London. She's no longer with us now. But I remember very well her telling me how wonderful, in the dark days of the Second World War, how wonderful the BBC was, how it informed, how it kept hope alive in the country. My mother would turn in her grave to see the attack on the BBC that we've seen in recent times. And believe you me, they're still out there, and that's why we as Liberal Democrats should stand up for something that's crucial to our country and makes us special as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Neil Hodgson to stand by, and now call Ruth Gripper from Truro and Falmouth to move Amendment 6.
Conference. Amendment 6 is an emergency amendment in response to Rishi Sunak's appalling, cynical announcements last Wednesday. Claiming that voters were fed up with politicians breaking their promises, he tore up his own party's 2019 manifesto. Claiming that important decisions were being taken without debate and scrutiny, he waited until Parliament was in recess before making his speech. And claiming that he was avoiding easy ways out, he courageously scrapped policies that never existed. For a meat tax, for 7 bins for recycling, for compulsory car sharing. Far from honest and courageous leadership, it was a Prime Minister scared of his own party shooting down policies that don't exist. And what will be the effect? It will accelerate global heating, no two ways about it. The UK was already off track to meet our legally binding target of net zero by 2050. And by pushing back the targets for electric vehicles, for home insulation, and for phasing out fossil fuel boilers, Sunak has made it even less likely that the UK will hit that target. It will take us longer to get there, and crucially, we'll be emitting more greenhouse gases along the way. And as Ros yesterday and Ed earlier this afternoon highlighted, these changes will undermine business confidence. The transition to net zero needs investment, huge sums invested in renewable power, new transmission lines, electric vehicles, chargers, the electrification of rail, zero-carbon industrial processes, infrastructure and technology. And the more confidence that investors have in a stable policy environment, the more they believe that the government won't change its mind, the more they are willing to invest, and the better for us consumers. Rishi Sunak has just made it much harder for the UK to compete with our economic rivals, who are offering more supportive policies and greater stability. As our own Ed Davey put it, the Conservatives have already trashed the economy of today. Now Rishi Sunak seems intent on trashing the economy of the future as well. And these changes won't help hard-up households. They will make the UK more reliant on fossil fuel imports in the middle of a global energy supply crisis. We have some of the oldest, leakiest housing in Europe. Scrapping requirements on landlords to insulate their properties means that tenants will keep living in cold, drafty and damp houses and flats, driving up energy bills and damaging their health and increasing costs on the NHS. The Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit has calculated that the impact on energy use and gas imports of a slower rollout of energy efficiency improvements could cost UK households up to £8 billion over the next 10 years. Tackling climate change won't be easy, but there is a positive story that is crying out to be told of what we will gain if we meet that challenge, the benefits of a green economy, the opportunities for business and for our own health and happiness. We need leaders who can see that story and are willing to work to make it happen. The UK could be a global leader in this, but Rishi Sunak is throwing that opportunity away. Conference, this is wrong. We condemn every one of these announcements. They are a desperate, cynical move by a desperate, cynical government. A government 20 points behind in the opinion polls that cares nothing for the long-term future of this country, but only for their short-term political advantage. I hope that our manifesto pledges to reverse every one of the delays that Sunak announced. Please vote for Amendment 6.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Tom Brake to stand by, and I now call Neil Hodgson from Wearside to speak against lines 81 and 82.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Conference. My name's Niall. I'm the parliamentary candidate in Sunderland Central in the North East. I'm not moving an amendment. I'm asking Conference to vote against this motion, particularly its commitment to introducing proportional representation, and I will explain for why. I attended the party rally yesterday and heard great things from a great many Liberal Democrat campaigners from around the country. However, it was disturbing to have two television celebrities appear on video showing us what I think is frankly the grubby reality of what that proposed manifesto commitment will mean in practice. I'll have to paraphrase Steve Coogan, but what he said was he would very much like to vote for the Labour Party, the party he supports. Unfortunately, he's forced to vote tactically Liberal Democrat where he lives. So we should push for a change to proportional representation so he can vote for the Labour Party as he wishes to do, if I followed him correctly. So that's a troubling enough thing to hear at the rally at a Liberal Democrat Party conference. But he was then followed by Carol Vorderman, also off the telly, who came on to promote a website for about 5 or 10 minutes, which tells hundreds of thousands of people around the UK not to vote for the Liberal Democrats. Curious? Now, I find that a very unusual position for a Liberal Democrat Party to take and for a message to be pushing out to our own supporters. Besides this being genuinely sickening, it makes a mockery of people like me and thousands of other Liberal Democrat campaigners who campaign for this party day in, day out against Labour. Campaigners rooted in communities who have a successful track record of winning by under first past the post. I don't care what Steve Coogan or Carol Vorderman think. They are not Liberal Democrats. We should not be giving a platform to people who think that you have to hold your nose to vote Liberal Democrat. It's embarrassing. Armchair commentators who see in PR an opportunity to erode our hard-won support in places like Lewis. I'm proud to be a Liberal and make a positive case for this party. And if you are too, then I hope you'll join me and vote against this self-destructive motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Robin Brown to stand by? Could I please also, apologies, an urgent announcement. Could Tony Vickers please go to the steward's desk? Tony Vickers to the steward's desk. Okay, where was I? Robin Brown, please stand by. Tom Breaks here.
Thank you very much. And Niall, you're a braver man than I am to come to a Lib Dem conference and speak against PR. But I think actually you were speaking against Steve Coogan and Carol Vorderman. But I think one thing that you should have also said is that actually PR is about giving the voters the choice. Voters who are Liberal Democrats. But they will also be Labour voters, Green voters, and indeed Conservative voters, making sure that voters are able to express their views and elect people they want to represent them. So I'm speaking in favour of lines 61 to 63 about a truly fair democracy. Now, there's no doubt that for a fair deal and yesterday's motion, restoring standards in public life, will start to reverse the democratic backsliding we have witnessed since 2019. I'd encourage you to go to Unlock Democracy's website to see a full report there that sets out exactly how our democracy has been compromised. What is set out in these motions is necessary but not sufficient. Now, I call on the Liberal Democrats to be even more ambitious for our democracy, from which millions are excluded. We have 8 million eligible voters not on the register. We have millions who are long-term residents who are excluded from voting. We had 14,000 people turned away on May the 4th in polling stations and probably going to get 80,000 turned away at the next general election. Now, the Liberal Democrats must join forces with other parties, and I hope the Labour Party will support scrapping voter ID, and also swing behind a massive voter registration drive that is needed before the next general election, getting those young voters, renters, ethnic minority voters who are all underrepresented on the electoral roll onto it, and back a campaign for automatic voter registration, including for overseas voters, so that people are registered to vote when they move, get a passport, or get a driving licence. Now, we shouldn't kid ourselves that if we are successful and everyone is registered, it's job done, democracy reinstated. The reality is now is that 9 out of 10 people feel little or no influence over government. The public don't buy top-down policy or decision-making anymore. They aren't satisfied with a vote every 4 or 5 years. They want a greater say like the Irish did over abortion or the French over climate change. We need Ed Davey to restate the commitment he has already made to use citizens' assemblies to involve the public in moulding and nurturing our democracy and give reality to Abraham Lincoln's vision of democracy as being the government of the people, by the people, for the people. That must be the Liberal Democrat way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Victoria Collins to stand by, and I call Robin Brown from Twickenham and Richmond, who's speaking against lines 60, 64 to 66 and 77 to 80.
Thank you. Conference, I'm here representing many members in Twickenham and Richmond who are calling for a stronger and clearer position on Europe in our manifesto. I'm sure that we're not the only local party where lots of people who are now key activists and donors joined because of the lead that we gave in fighting Brexit. Members do get that this country has many challenges right now, and that on the doorsteps, immediate concerns are often, but not exclusively, the cost of living crisis, the state of our public services, particularly the NHS, and the sewage scandal. But they also expect us to talk about our liberal vision for a better Britain that's true to who we are and what we want the country to be for our children and our grandchildren. One that takes net zero seriously. that has a growing and fairer economy, and that has a strong cooperative relationship with Europe, confidence rebuilt, trade recovered, and the single market rejoined. Now, it was great to hear Layla talking about the roadmap and a longer-term objective of EU membership in this conference hall. So why does it feel as though our European policy is now a closely guarded family secret that we'd rather not discuss in public? Well, Ed's introduction to the pre-manifesto doesn't mention Europe. The 5 key themes don't feature Europe in the headings. In fact, it's glaringly omitted from theme 4, a strong United Kingdom and a fair international order. International is section 21 out of 21 in the Fair Deal, with the single market finally getting a brief look in on page 46. Conference, we must talk confidently on Europe as we head into the next general election. Why? Well, firstly, internationalism is a core value. We spent years fighting Brexit and championing the benefits of a deep relationship with our closest neighbours. We'll come unstuck if we try and hedge around what we believe. Second, we know, and increasingly the country knows, that the damage wrought by Brexit is in fact contributing directly to many of those doorstep concerns. And finally, and this would really be galling, we risk looking as though we're being outflanked by Labour. Now, yes, Keir Starmer's statements are very, very thin gruel when you unpick them, but he's getting coverage. And there is a wider debate starting now within the EU about new forms of membership. We can't just go AWOL now. Conference, you can't vote on the Cambridge motion, I'm afraid, so please support the overall motion. But when we finalise our manifesto, let's add the words, a closer relationship with Europe, into the key themes. Let's be explicit that we will be working to rejoin the single market, and let's free up our leaders and our parliamentarians to make the case in public and shape a national conversation on Europe rather than sidestepping it.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Michael Wang to stand by, and I now call Victoria Collins from West Hertfordshire to speak for the motion.
Hello, Conference. I have the absolute privilege of representing the new seat of Harpenden and Berkhamsted, which brings together 3 constituencies, 3 Conservative constituencies. That means that I currently hold 3 Tory MPs accountable, and my have they all been terrible. They've supported water companies polluting our dear chalk streams, taken free school meals from children in need. They've overseen the downfall of our National Health Service, propped up Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and one of my local MPs used public money to pay for his car fines and was opaque about the paid work he's doing to lobby the government. Now we have a crumbling economy, crumbling schools, and our public services are bursting at the seams. Enough is enough. But I'm working as a local champion, and we're working day in, day out to get those Tories out. But I'm proudly standing here as a Liberal Democrat and standing for the values that we stand for. I grew up helping my mum on the shop floor, and I watched my dad, who worked passionately in social housing and sustainability. When business got tough, though, I saw just how hard it was to face financial difficulty, to see your family live month to month and be worried about the roof over your head. I've also seen the way out, when people believe in you, when the community believes in you. But now I speak to family after family who are struggling, who can't make ends meet, and who are worried about the country falling apart with a failing, visionless government at the helm. That's why I support this motion, to be able to stand up proudly for a better, greener society. This sets out our proud values for the election, something that I can use to bolster and shout from the rooftops about our fair deal and what we can do to bring this country as the next general election comes closer and closer. This pre-manifesto and the amendments set out a vision, and to name just a few, to rebuild a strong, fair economy with fair taxes, to repair broken benefits and the broken benefits safety net, to put climate change at the heart of that manifesto. to enable fair access to good public services, ensure everyone can get the care they need, invest in renewable power, empower local communities, establish a fairer voting system, and to fix our broken relationship with Europe. I joined the Liberal Democrats because of Brexit, but I've stayed for so much more. Our preamble says that we want to safeguard a fair, free and open society, to balance the fundamental values of liberty, equality and community, and which no one shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity. Something that's been spoken about today, something so dear, to give people and our planet the opportunities they deserve. So supporting this pre-manifesto will help us to get out there, to get election ready, to take on the Tories and to bring about the much needed change that this country is in desperate need of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Jackie Bell to stand by, and I now call Michael Wang from Brighton and Hove, who will be speaking against Amendment 4.
Conference. I'm so moved and thankful for Michael for moving this amendment with such passion. But I feel obliged to highlight the problematic detail with aid calculated based on gross national income and OECD definitions, which is what Amendment 4 specifies. Two figures, Conference. £36 million. Last year, Pakistan was struck by catastrophic floods. In the aftermath, all of only £36 million was pledged by the UK government as international aid as of January 2023. £3.5 billion. In the year 2022, the government expended approximately £3.5 billion on refugee spending incurred in-country, primarily on hotel costs, because the artificially created backlog of 130,000. And 100-fold difference. A flood of biblical proportion juxtaposed against a huge overspend, entirely the result of a government struggling to legislate civilized laws and manage its own department. Yet, Conference, both spendings are funded and come from the same pot, the very same UK foreign aid budget. Yes, it's hard to believe, but it's true. Every penny spent on hotels is one less spent on actual international aid. This absurdity was able to arise because GNA-based foreign aid, again, what Amendment 4 specifies, which is calculated on OECD definitions, in fact permit expenditure on temporary refugee assistance during their first year in the host country to be counted and included in the books. And I believe this is not good enough. Because by counting hotel costs as aid, it is profoundly damaging for three key reasons. Number one, a substantial proportion of this expenditure goes straight back to the pocket of the government, as accommodation suppliers are taxed through VAT, PAYE, and corporation tax. Number two, what doesn't go straight back to the government pockets circulates in the domestic economy and thus goes no way to further international development. And number three, it creates no incentive for the government to address the crisis, as more money can always be secured away from international development and paid towards the hotel budget. Michael, you moved this motion with such passion, but I would very much like to talk with you to see how we can address this problem, but not based on GNA-based aid. I must propose supporting the motion as it stands without the amendment, because the wording of the motion as it stands keeps the door open for a radical solution beyond GNA-based aid. A new solution which no morally bankrupt government could possibly exploit. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I did ask Jackie Bell to stand by, but I'm desperately trying to see if we can run over to get some more speakers in because there are so many cards and we're currently running 12 minutes late. Michael Kilpatrick has promised 30 seconds speech, so we're going to call Michael Kilpatrick to speak. Jackie, I'm going to call you when we start doing summations, because you're summating an Amendment 4. There was an opposition to Amendment 4, but I want to get some other speakers in rather than going straight to summations, if that's okay.
Thank you, Nick. 30 seconds. House of Lords reform was mentioned. I was in the policy working group that did England in the federal UK. autumn 2021. Our policy is actually for a federal UK, which means a Senate. Now, a Senate may be directly elected, but actually that's not the same as a directly elected House of Lords in the same sense. I can't explain the details of that in 30 seconds, but we can have a policy that works moving forwards to a Senate and in our current unitary state. But our manifesto must reflect actual current policy written only 2 years ago. So can we actually have that addressed after the next election? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your elevator pitch there. Apologies, I'm not calling people to stand by. I'm just I'm shuffling the cards to try and get as many speeches in as possible. Okie dokie. Lee Darg, could you please come to stage and speak? And then Jackie Bell, you can now stand by. And I'm sorry about this, but as I said, I want us to get as many speakers as possible. We are running 12 minutes over. So apologies to Willie Rennie and Alex Cole-Hamilton will be starting that speech late.
Don't want to hold up Alex. Thank you, Nick. I often bemoan to people when they go on television or radio or do speeches in our party that they don't kind of spell out what liberalism is. And I think it's important that we remember to do that. Now, quite rightly, they say to me, but Lee, I can't read out a 10-page thesis on liberalism every time I go on the television, quite rightly. But let's just take a quick history tour of what liberalism has delivered this country. At the turn of the last century, we supported suffragettes and women's rights, and we opened up pensions to everybody. We invented the NHS. We invented the welfare state. In the 1970s, we were the first party to support what we now call LGBT+ rights. In the 1990s, we were the only party to speak out through Paddy Ashdown to look after the people of Hong Kong. We know that Charlie proudly spoke out against the Iraq War in the 2000s. And yes, even during coalition, we, I think, most proudly spoke out for the first time in politics about mental health. And I'm really pleased to see that we've made that a centrepiece of our manifesto again today. So we've got a really proud tradition. And there are lots of liberals out there that don't know they're liberals because they don't know what the word means. Most people, unlike us here, don't do politics in their daily lives. They have lives to get on with, as we have as well, but we spend a bit more time in this area. So we know what it means. We know how it makes us feel. We know what it means to our communities. But unless we explain to people, and I always take the easy examples of health and education, if we don't have good health, if we don't have access to good quality education for people from all backgrounds, and we don't offer these to young people most of all so they get the best start in life, if you don't have a good health, you don't have a good education, and I agree we don't have a planet that we can live on, then absolutely you can't live your life to the fullest. You can't be liberal. You can't express yourself the way you want to and develop yourself into the person you want to be. So I'm really proud that that's actually turned a corner at this conference because we are proudly talking about what it is to be liberal. We know that the country needs liberals now more than ever. They are the answers to our present and future problems. So please proudly talk about liberalism. You don't need a 10-page thesis, but make sure you go out and promote this wonderful policy paper and all of the amendments I support. Please be proud of being liberals and make sure that other people are too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Dick Newby to stand by, and I now call Jackie Bell to summate on Amendment 4.
Conference. International aid is a fair thing for developed countries to provide to those less well-off nations. As Michael said, our party constitution says no one should be enslaved by poverty. The 0.7% of GNI target was a key achievement of Lib Dems in coalition. I know how much it meant to Mike Moore in bringing it forward. It's a crying shame that the Tories scrapped it, along with a specific Department for International Development. What message does that give? I'm all right, Jack. Aid to less well-off nations may enable those in countries affected by climate change or conflict to stay home rather than risk taking unsafe routes across the sea, where they may be met by hostility when they seek sanctuary. Money would be better spent in the home countries rather than funding hotel accommodation for those who are displaced and find themselves in a very long backlog of claims for asylum. It may not be illegal to spend the aid budget in that way, and I know that Michael Wang has raised some concerns, but it seems morally wrong. So I know that Michael has raised his concerns. Perhaps it is something that the Policy Committee and others can discuss further with him. However, that we must do something to restore the faith of those developing nations in Britain if it is to remain a superpower on the world stage. Therefore, Conference, please support the amendment and the motion as a whole, and let's put forward a positive manifesto for the UK at the next general election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please call Dick Newby to the stage, Chair of the Manifesto Working Group, to submit on the motion?
Conference, it's a great pleasure to summate this debate on the pre-manifesto. On starting my work as chair of the Manifesto Working Group, I thought perhaps I should draw inspiration from the manifesto on which Henry Campbell Bannerman fought the 1906 general election, leading as it did to the largest ever Liberal majority, and it was most instructive. The manifesto consisted of a mere 2 paragraphs. The first covered domestic policy, the second was on foreign policy. This seemed to me to have a lot to recommend it. Unfortunately, when I suggested it to senior members of the Policy Committee, they suggested that perhaps it wouldn't quite do the trick second time round. We have, however, I hope, learnt something from this precedent. It is that shorter is better. That unless you set out a relatively small number of priorities, it appears that you have no priorities at all. And that if documents are too wordy, they're simply not read. This is particularly the case in the digital age, when no one will read a paper manifesto, and very many will access manifestos via their phone. The very thought of trying to read some of our previous recent manifestos via a phone or tablet makes me wince. So the model we intend to follow in the manifesto proper is the one we followed in the pre-manifesto document. In each area, we've set out just a small number of priorities which we seek to implement in government. With the manifesto proper, we'll have a click-through to a more detailed prospectus. But the whole thing will be no longer than a typical past version, but a lot more accessible. There'll also be very many things which we believe in, which we've included in policy papers passed by the conference, which won't find their way into the manifesto at all. But the reason is that simply that we're producing something that can help us in our campaigning, not an encyclopedia. Today's pre-manifesto is a sighting shot of the final version, and it contains many tremendous individual policy proposals. But it also answers the key overarching questions. What sort of society do we want to live in, and how are we going to bring it about? What do the Lib Dems stand for, and how will they change society for the better? Its key sections are the introduction and the 5 main policy themes. Everything else flows from them. It sets out our overarching aim for society, to make it a fair society where each individual, whatever their background or attributes, can flourish, and one where the overpowerful are held to account. And 5 strands of what this means in practice, as Layla set out: a fair, prosperous and innovative economy, fair access to good public services and a strong social safety net, a flourishing environment with fair access to nature for everybody, a strong United Kingdom and a fair international order, and a truly fair democracy. It needs hardly saying, but the Tories failed dismally in each of these areas. And Labour are so scared, so timid, so unambitious, that they completely fail to live up to the scale of the problems which we face as a country. So if people say that they don't know what the Lib Dems stand for, tell them about fairness, tell them about an opportunity society, about a clean and a healthy society. Tell them about Britain playing its full role in Europe and the world, about bringing real democracy to our politics. Conference 6 amendments have been put down to this motion, and in a nutshell, the Policy Committee supports them all. We agree with Katie about a truly global approach to climate change and nature recovery. We obviously agree with John on the need to have a democratically elected House of Lords. I've wanted to be a senator for Yorkshire for years, and so I'm happy, Michael, to make clear that that's the kind of approach we have in mind. We agree with George about the need for a comprehensive strategy for dealing with the threats posed by China. And Michael, we've been unwavering in our support for the reintroduction of the 0.7% commitment on overseas development assistance and the recreation of DFID. And as Jamie knows, we've consistently supported the BBC, other public sector broadcasters, and the creative sector more generally against attacks on them under this appalling government. And Ruth, we have condemned the Prime Minister's U-turns on climate policy in the last week, and we would reverse them. There have been many other interesting and important policy points made in the debate, far too many for me to respond to individually. I'd only say to Niall that I think we all share frustrations about tactical voting, but the way to deal with it is to actually get proportional representation, not take out a reference from it from the document. But Conference, I'd like to return to Europe in more ways than one. What lay behind David's attempt to suspend standing order and Robin's speech was a concern about the party's commitment to Europe. How firm is it? And how important do we believe this issue is for the future of our country? Well, let me be perfectly clear, as this manifesto is actually perfectly clear, and the manifesto itself will be perfectly clear. This party believes that our economic prosperity, our security, and our influence in the world require us to be back at the heart of Europe. Unlike some other parties, we've set out a series of specific steps that would bring that about. Not vague wafflings about reducing barriers to trade, but realistic, pragmatic, remorseless steps which would end our European isolation. For many of us, certainly me, Europe has been a driving passion throughout my political life, and I'm certainly not stepping back now. But as anybody who's been on doorsteps and talked to lots of voters recently will know, the next election is not going to be principally about Europe. It's going to be about the cost of living, about the NHS, about the environment. And today's document sets out a clear, liberal vision about how we would tackle these issues and turn the country around. So now let's approve the document, get back out on the doorsteps, and sell it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dick. Okay, thank you very much, Conference. We now move on to a series of 7 votes. The online voting on the amendments has already started. So can I ask those of you in favour of Amendment 1 to please raise your voting passes? Thank you. And those against? Thank you. Can I please see those in favour of Amendment 2, please raise your passes. Thank you. And those against? Thank you. Can I please see those in favour of Amendment 3 to raise your passes? Thank you very much. And those against? Okie dokie. Those in favour of Amendment 4? And those against? Amendment 5. Those in favour? And those against? And Amendment 6. Those in favour? And those against? Maybe for the substantive vote, try and use the other hand and get the exercises on both sides. We're just going to check the online vote, but I think we've hopefully given them enough time. Just bear with us. Okie dokie. We have got Amendment 1 has passed, Amendment 2 has passed, Amendment 3 has passed, Amendment 4 has passed, Amendment 5 has passed, Amendment 6 has passed. Therefore, all amendments have passed. We now move on to a vote on the motion as amended. Other hands, please. And those in favour of the motion, please raise your lanyards, your voting passes. And those against? Thank you. We'll just allow the online voting to catch up. In the meantime, I'm going to say some things about things happening later. After this, we have a speech by Alex Cole-Hamilton. After that, we will have a motion on protecting our neighbourhoods, return to community policing. And then at the last session, we will have the very exciting title, Standing Order Amendment, limiting the number of constitutional amendments and standing order amendments that can be discussed at any one conference. And I'm certain many people are looking forward to that. To those of you who are leaving, I haven't actually announced the result of the motion yet. And if you are leaving, I ask you to do it quietly, quickly, and safely. Okie dokie, I'm going to close the online voting. I'm delighted to announce the motion has passed as amended by the 6 amendments. Thank you very much. My aide has been Alison Rouse, and I now hand over to Willie Rennie, who will be chairing the next item. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Willie Rennie. I used to be leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. My new job is Wendy Chamberlain's personal assistant and Alex Cole-Hamilton's proud dad. But I've always appreciated the support of the Federal Conference. You've given me some warm support over many conference speeches, and I'm sure you'll give Alex the support that he deserves as well. Alex has taken on the job with great vigour and vim, enthusiasm. He's bounced all over Scotland. He has delivered an excellent job so far, and he's made a name in several subjects, in terms of long COVID, on mental health, on sewage, on rack concrete, and on Ukraine most passionately. And so passionately that he has now been sanctioned by the Kremlin. But it's my proud duty now to introduce to you the new leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, my friend Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Conference. Conference, this is the first time I've addressed you in person as our Scottish leader since Willie passed the baton to me 2 years ago. And can I take this opportunity to thank you, Willie, for your leadership, your service to our party, and your friendship over our years. Ladies and gentlemen, Willie Rennie. Willie said some very kind things there, but he was right to say I am the first Liberal Democrat parliamentarian to be officially sanctioned by the Kremlin. My Ukrainian house guest calls that Santa's good list. And speaking of Ukraine, if you do nothing else at conference, do not miss Kira Rudik, who is the leader of our sister party, Cholos faction, over in Ukraine. In over 20 years of coming to our conferences, I have never heard or seen anything like her address our conference in Dundee. It was sensational. Conference, there are few things in life that cheer me more than the sight that greets me now. I am thrilled to my fingertips to be here because I love this party. For nearly a quarter of a century, I've served it in many capacities, in one time or another as activist, staff member, candidate, and now as parliamentarian. Wherever you are, I feel at home. The evidence of my devotion to this party can actually be found in the pages of a well-thumbed road atlas and a loyalty card for the Charnock Richard services in Chorley. It's why I drove a carload of young Liberals 9 hours down the M6 from Edinburgh to North Shropshire. It's why I drove them 11 hours to Frome. And it's why I'll do it again in the 7 hours it'll take us to get to mid-Bedfordshire. Friends, I come with news of the North, and it is good news. The Liberal revival is underway for us too, and we have taken such inspiration from Ed's leadership and from your amazing victories in the South. Last May, as they had done since I took over as leader, the pundits were writing us off, predicting that the Scottish local government elections would see us slip backwards. Conference, we proved them wrong. We outperformed every other opposition party and grew our councillor base by a third. It made me realise that the history of our movement is rooted in local politics, and so too lies the promise of our future. Because with success in local government, we can change and improve the lot and the lives of our communities in big and important ways. From that kernel of realisation emerged our strategy to grow our Scottish party and its fortunes in every community and at every level of government. So here is the plan. We will achieve all of that by commencing our campaign for the 2027 Scottish local council elections right now. We call the strategy 150 Rising. By seeking to increase the number of our Scottish Liberal Democrat councillors from 87 to over 150 in just 4 years' time, we will lift the vote at Westminster and at Holyrood along the way. We will start engine rooms of activity in every ward, constituency and region in Scotland and give the communities of our nation the gold standard Liberal Democrat service they deserve. I said I was bringing news of the North, but something tells me that what's been going on in Scotland might have captured your attention already. First, of course, there was the shock resignation of Nicola Sturgeon. Humza Yousaf then won the bitter contest to succeed her, and he enjoyed a honeymoon period of less than a week. And then came the arrests. Now, I cannot speak to an active police inquiry, but it is fair to say that the impact of all of that has been transcendent. Everybody is talking about it. It is said that when you're elected president of the United States of America, you are immediately told the secrets of Area 51 and the crashed UFOs. Whereas in Scotland, if you become leader of the SNP, you're immediately told the secrets of an unused high-end camper van parked in a driveway in Dunfermline. Conference, whilst this is steeped both in intrigue, schadenfreude, and even a bit of humour, it is a distraction that the people of Scotland just don't need right now, and I will come on to that. Nicola Sturgeon's reputation is now being debated as never before. But she once declared that she wanted to be judged on her record on education. It took 6 years to finally persuade the Nationalists to adopt the pupil premium that the Liberal Democrats had delivered in England and Wales. Now, we have new evidence of how the Scottish Government have let that slide ever since. Analysis I'm publishing today shows how the value of the pupil premium has been eroded by more than £200 in real terms for every single Scottish child from a poorer background. That's money that could have been spent on breakfast clubs, on dedicated teachers and support staff. It could have been spent on activities that inspire and capture the imagination. It is a £200 stealth cut. They are pulling up the ladder for the poorest children in Scotland. Shame on them. If the SNP won't address it in the coming budget negotiations, then they should get out of the way for somebody who will. Conference, this is a time of great change and great challenge. Record NHS waiting lists, the cost of living crisis biting, the crumbling concrete in our schools and the sewage dumped in our rivers. Yet we have a governing party unequal to those challenges, racked by scandal, blinded by division. The SNP are now hemorrhaging fair-minded, reasonable people, people who are looking for some party, for somebody to inspire them again. Conference, we are the answer they have been looking for, and it is why Humza Yousaf will be the last nationalist First Minister of Scotland. In Scotland, just as with the rest of the UK, change feels so tantalisingly close, but is still just out of reach. It brings to mind the words of Robert Browning, who wrote nearly 2 centuries ago, "Glad was I when I reached the other bank. Now for a better country." And turn your eyes to the bank of the Clyde. There you will find 2 symbols of nationalist incompetence. I'm talking about passenger ferries built by the government at the publicly owned shipyard. In 2017, on the eve of the snap general election, Nicola Sturgeon attended the official launch ceremony. "May God bless her and all who sail in her," she said. 3 cheers, high-vis and hard hats, school children waving the salt tires they had been given as the boat slipped down into the Clyde. But every last bit of it was fake. The windows were painted on, the wrong bow, the fake funnels and fake engines. It is enough to make Kim Jong-un blush. A full 6 years later, and guess where those ferries are now? Still in that very same shipyard, still under construction. Costs tripled, cheaper to start again. The only thing to arrive on time were the boss's bonuses. And the worst part of it all, the human cost underneath it. The islanders left with broken ferries, their businesses threatened, shelves empties, and hospital appointments on the mainland missed. The good workers of a proud shipbuilding industry betrayed, their reputations trashed by government mismanagement. Rust covered those ferries, just as decay enveloped the SNP. And Conference, it speaks to the rot at the heart of Scottish politics that not one nationalist minister has had the decency to resign over a scandal that can be seen from space. Conference Islanders deserve compensation for all they've had to go through, but on top of that, I want to tell you about the Liberal vision for connecting these communities. And for this, we're taking our inspiration from further north. We are looking to the Faroe Islands. They've connected their island communities with bridges and short tunnels. It has been transformational. 18 islands and 90% of their population now protected from bad weather and breakdowns. They've built the world's first undersea roundabout. That kind of innovation is what Scotland's ferry-dependent communities desperately need. I'm talking about the village of Corran in the shadow of Ben Nevis, where the ferry crossing there is the length of an athletics track, but is so regularly out of use that it necessitates a 40-mile detour and the closure of several local businesses. I'm talking about Unst, the northernmost Northern Isle in Shetland. It is far as it is possible to be from the sands of this south coast. Perched atop the cliffs where the Atlantic crashes into the North Sea, they're actually building a spaceport there. They are launching satellites into orbit. How much easier it would be to establish that new industry if only they weren't entirely dependent on sea crossings. Connecting these communities should matter to all of us because it is in the national interest. That is why Alistair Carmichael and Beatrice Wishart are doing a power of work in both parliaments to make this happen. And for communities like Corran, it's why Councillor Angus MacDonald are making waves and taking solutions to Highland Council. And can I say, won't it be amazing to see Angus MacDonald bring Charles Kennedy's seat back into the Lib Dem fold at the next general election? Conference, whether it's our island communities or our Scottish inner cities, everyone deserves the chance to get on in life. They deserve a fair deal. People are working their socks off. They are playing by the rules, but they are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. Conference, the Tories are laughing at them. They crash the economy and they are lurching from outrage to outrage. But the Tories aren't the only ones making this harder. 4 days ago, the SNP Green Coalition government closed the consultation on council tax. They are plotting a wave of increases to a tax they claim to hate amidst the worst cost of living since the end of rationing. 1 in 4 households in Scotland would pay up to £835 more each year. And they will be paying more for less because it won't offset the systematic underfunding of local government. You can see that already in school class sizes and in the cavernous potholes in our road. What makes it even more galling? Well, the SNP have been promising to scrap the council tax since 2007. Nicola Sturgeon claimed she would shout it from the rooftops. The Nationalists have gone from abolishing it to freezing it to now planning the biggest hike in it in its history. So my message to the new First Minister is this: Humza Yousaf, back our power surge for local councils instead. End the underfunding of local government once and for all and give the council tax to the busiest member of your cabinet, the ever-reliable, well-worn SNP shredder. Scotland deserves better than a government unequal to the challenges of our time. We face big and international problems that demand collaborative international solutions. And I want to tell you why I find nationalism to be the polar opposite of liberalism. In 1966, Bobby Kennedy told a group of students, "Only earthbound man still clings to the dark and poisoning superstition that his world is bounded by the nearest hill, that his universe ends at river's shore. that his common humanity is enclosed among the tight circle of people who share his town or his views or the colour of his skin. He was talking about the politics of identity and division, ideologies which deflect blame, simplistic populist solutions to complex problems. So it was for Brexit, so it would be for Scottish independence. Conference, these islands and our world face existential threats, colossal existential threats. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, pandemics that will not respect borders, and global boiling. They will not be bounded by the nearest hill. They do not end at River's shore, and we all know, conference, that the answer to none of them is to be found in a border or a flag. Conference, we come together in halls like this to build our vision for a liberal society. And north of the border, that vision is a liberal Scotland, proud in its membership of a reformed and federal United Kingdom at the very heart of Europe. For so long, that has seemed beyond our grasp, but we need it now more than ever. And the sands of politics are shifting in big and unpredictable ways. The promise of a new enlightenment lies ahead. We are here for it. A spirit of reform is gripping these islands, and we are shaping it. Change is coming, and we will be part of it. Conference, the other bank may finally be in sight. We only need to reach for it now for a better country. Thank you.
Congratulations, Alex, on a tremendous speech, his first speech as party leader in Scotland. Put your hands together again for Alex Hamilton, please. And we're moving on to the next business, which is F25, Protect Our Neighbourhoods, a return to community policing, and the chair is Sam Barrett. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Conference. We come now to F25, Protecting Our Neighbourhoods, a Return to Community Policing. You can find this on page 63 of the printed agenda and on the app. If you are leaving the auditorium, can you do so quietly? There's one amendment to this motion that you can find in Conference Daily. Could I ask all speakers do keep to time? We're obviously running quite behind the advertised programming on this. And I ask Catherine Macy to stand by and call Caroline Pigeon to propose the motion.
Conference. This afternoon, we are debating the much-needed changes to policing in our country. And this conversation has never felt more timely. Over the past year, trust in the police has been shaken to its core. Baroness Casey's review into the Met Police blew a lid off what many of us already suspected, that institutional racism, sexism and homophobia is all too common in our police services. And her report studied the Met, but it would be naive to think that these cultural issues are confined to just one police service. And this report came on top of the Conservatives' draconian new anti-protest laws, which are impossible to implement and have further eroded the public's trust. And across the country, black people are still 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. Rebuilding trust in the police is not only about rooting out corrupt officers, But it's also about being confident that the police will show up and take things seriously if you're the victim of crime. Right now, it's hard to feel that confidence. The vast majority of crimes are going unsolved. Around 5,700 across England and Wales every single day last year. Meanwhile, less than 6% of crimes led to a suspect being charged. You know, just last year, over 45,000 burglaries weren't even attended by the police. You know, this is unacceptable, and it threatens the very trust that is the foundation for policing by consent. Which is why community policing is at the heart of everything Liberal Democrats are calling for today, where officers are visible and known, with the time and resources to focus on tackling local crime, getting the basics right. It's not only vital for protecting our neighbourhoods, but for rebuilding trust and faith in the police. But how do we do that? First things first, it's about the number of officers we have out and about working in our communities. But it's far more complicated than just recruiting more officers, because, you know, even though the Conservatives managed to achieve a 20,000 officer uplift, it hasn't resulted in the visible policing our communities deserve. Which is not surprising when you look at the number of officers who are actually focused on the front line. Take the Met, for example. It's the only police service that has failed its recruitment target under the government's uplift policy. But worse still, just 7% of Met officers are assigned to neighbourhood policing teams. This, combined with the fact that around 600 police community support officers have been taken off London streets since 2015, it's not surprising that Baroness Casey declared that the city no longer has a functioning neighbourhood policing service. Or that a national YouGov poll from earlier this year showed that 56% of people reported that they never see police on foot patrols in their neighbourhoods, up from 30% in 2015. So this motion seeks to change all that by enabling local police to restore proper community policing. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to do that, which is why, unlike the Conservatives, we aren't going to prescribe to local police services how many extra constables, police staff, or PCSOs they need. But we know that it requires recruiting more, paid for by scrapping police and crime commissioners and investing these savings in the front line instead. But it also means freeing up existing officers' time to make sure they're able to focus on tackling the types of crimes that affect local communities the most. From streamlining administrative processes to setting up an online crime agency that would take over online fraud and abuse that can eat up a disproportionate amount of local officers' time. And setting up a pre-charge diversion scheme for youth offenders under the age of 25. And of course, having more police on the streets won't be enough to keep our neighbourhoods safe unless they are trusted by their communities. And it's understandable that many people are struggling to feel that trust right now, especially women, black and minority ethnic communities, and the LGBTQ+ community. You know, we've seen many hideous cases in the last few years. Only 2 years ago, in March 2021, Sarah Everard was abducted, raped and murdered by a serving Metropolitan Police officer. The inquest into the Stephen Port murders found that fundamental failings by the Met probably contributed to 3 of the 4 deaths. Child Q is just one of many examples where the Metropolitan Police has failed our black and minority ethnic communities. You know, change is urgently needed, but sadly, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It requires significant cultural shifts within policing. This motion sets out where we can begin that journey, starting with looking at the Baroness Casey review and implementing its recommendations across other police services where appropriate. And at the same time, we want to introduce mandatory training for police in understanding the impact of trauma on victims of violence against women and girls. This will help to ensure that survivors are better supported and address the feelings many women have that may stop them from actually coming forward to the police. We also support the amendment calling for training in discrimination and hate crime too.
Rebuilding trust is about confidence. Confidence that if you raise an issue with the police, they will take it seriously and properly investigate. A proven track record is the best way to build that confidence, which is why this motion also includes our call for a statutory burglary response guarantee, where every domestic burglary will be attended and investigated by the police. So, Conference, I urge you to back this motion and support the amendment, because things cannot continue how they are for any longer. Our communities deserve better. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their own homes and walking down their own streets. This motion sets out a credible, comprehensive plan to do just that. Conference, please support the motion and amendment today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Can I ask Gideon Amos to stand by? And I now call Catherine Macy to propose Amendment 1.
Sarah Everard, Trevor Smith, Sarah Reid and Donald Burgess. Some of the few people we have lost due to the state of the current police in this country, due to sexism, racism and ableism. Protected characteristics, in my opinion, as a Lib Dem, don't go far enough. Someone had to say it. However, they are a good indicator, and that is why LDDA have put this amendment in today. As an autistic person, I'm usually very easy masking, but I had an incident with a police officer when some noise went off, and I had a meltdown, went nonverbal, and he almost choked me to death. I had bruises for about a week. I didn't report this because I was 17 and embarrassed and scared. At the age of 25, I now regret that, but there we go. We do what we can, and this amendment is one of those things. The police force in this country are broken, and training is not going to fix that, but it can begin to fix that. Ensuring that everyone who attends calls, especially since disabled people are significantly more likely to have people called on them, people assuming that because of their disability they are drunk or high and therefore not welcome in establishments. Police need to be aware of this and be able to support us instead of criminalize us. This amendment asks for the police to be educated in protected characteristics. This is inclusive of age, pregnancy, disability, race. It's a small change, so I won't go on for much longer, but please do support the amendment and support LDDA in reminding everyone that disabled people deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Can I now ask Linda Jack to stand by, and I call Gideon Amos from Taunton Dean to speak for the motion.
Thank you, Conference. Ever since Mrs. Thatcher said that when it comes to society, there is no such thing, I felt she defined the difference between liberalism and conservatism better than anyone else. And ever since that date, Conservative governments have systematically undermined, cut, impoverished and demoralised our public realm and the community services that make our communities safer, richer and more vibrant, often so they can just be privatised and handed over to their mates. The things that make our towns safer and better places to live. Once in Somerset, for example, we had a network of youth centres. When the Conservatives took over the county council, they didn't just cut a few youth centres, they completely abolished the youth service altogether, leaving our councillors now struggling to deliver services for children and young people against a backdrop of massive underfunding and a social care crisis, which also has not been dealt with by the Conservative government in the way they promised. They've demoralised teachers, so they're leaving the profession in record numbers. And they've decimated council services, ensuring that people who used to populate our public realm and our public environments are gone. people who made our places safer, from the public toilet attendant to the park wardens, to the lollipop ladies and gents, to community education programs and sports provision. Many of these things are now things of the past. So when the Tories claim they've recruited 20,000 extra officers, forgive me if I don't accept that until we in Taunton and Wellington see officers patrolling on the beat in our towns and communities. And I've written to the Conservative Commissioner to request just that. Guess what? I haven't had a reply. And the Conservatives are hoping that you will forget they cut more police officers than any other government in history. Their new officers are trying to replace the 20,000 that they cut. They've let our country down badly. They've let our police services down badly, and they've let our communities down badly. They like to campaign on three-word slogans. They think if you get the right three-word slogan, they'll just be okay and they'll win the next election. So I've got a few three-word slogans for them. For former Tory Prime Ministers, stop breaking laws. For former Tory Chancellors, start paying taxes. And for our country that's crying out for change, save our NHS, clean our rivers, and more beat bobbies. Please support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gideon. I now call Claire Tevlin to stand by and Linda Jack to speak in favour of the lines 78 to 81 of the motion.
Afternoon, conference. I can just about see you. But some of you who know me will know that this is the first time for a long time that I haven't had to use a mobility scooter. So many, many thank yous to the NHS for that. As you might imagine, those of you, again, that know me, that line 78 to 81 really touch a chord with me. I have campaigned in this party for many, many years, and the wider country, for a statutory youth service. And this is a step towards that. And what I wanted to say is that if we're going to have diversion, we have to recognise it's part of prevention. And you know that, I think it was one of the big youth organisations who worked out very recently that you could save £3.2 billion in public spending with a properly funded youth service. Now, going back a few years, when I used to be a detached youth worker, I always said at this stage I wouldn't dare go out on the street with my stick and say, hello, my name's Linda, I'm a youth worker. But I used to do that. And I remember one young person saying one day to me, there was a group of them, they'd been causing trouble, we'd been asked by the police to go and talk to them, and they said to me, well, we're shit, aren't we, Linda? So I said, well, who says you're shit? And the police did. And so what we did was, it was create a self-fulfilling prophecy that if these young people were going to be seen as shit, they'd be as shit as they could. And they got their self-esteem from feeling that they were getting one over on the police. As a result of that project, I'm pleased to say we were able to work really closely with the police. I even actually had the chief of police have me and my boss in his office and say, what do you think our policing policy should be on this particular estate? So I just see this as so fundamental. We want to see an improvement both in the conduct of our police and the numbers of our police, but we need to do it in a way that's holistic, that recognises the police can't do it on their own. The health service can't do it on its own. Schools can't do it on their own. We need to work together to ensure that every young person gets the best start in life. And as you will know, most of those young people that end up in trouble tend to be the ones that have had a really poor start in life. And just that little bit of extra care can go all the way. Now, I want to just make the point that, and do you know what, I'm sorry, oh, there is a red light. Oh, sorry. I can't make any other points because I'm finished. But anyway, I do support this motion and in particular those lines. Thank you. I was listening to
Thank you, Linda.
All right, my darling.
And thank you for self-cutting your speech to a close. It's very appreciated. Can I call Claire Tevlin to speak and ask Kevin Chun to stand by?
Good afternoon, conference. So I used to work for a police and crime commissioner, where I come from, and I'm currently a councillor. So whilst I believe in this motion and protecting our neighbourhood policing, I do think there are certain lines that we need to reconsider. So line 44. Unfortunately, we are not in the era anymore of the Bobby on the beat down the street. Policing has changed into a more strategic approach that needs more technical skill in the office, where they are dealing with things like modern slavery, child sexual exploitation, county lines drugs trafficking, rural crime, roads policing. All of these require specialist activity. Therefore, it's important that police and crime commissioners do still exist and are utilised in the right way through strategic partnerships and a strategic partnership approach with local authority. I worked on a county lines drugs trafficking campaign myself as part of a local authority, and to see the collaborative approach with the police was the best investment. So I would also say that line 27 for PCSOs, yes, we need PCSOs. However, I would also consider that we need to invest in more grassroots activism through community volunteering in terms of the police. And extension out to special constables and recruiting that way into our communities as a way of enhancing our budgets. I would also go to say line 57 in terms of scrapping PCCs. Well, I think actually police and crime panels do exist in the police and crime community, and you see the merits of this through a strategic approach. And I think, yes, what needs to happen is PCC salaries as a high-level exec salaries, more than an MP, and their high teams could be cut right down to say a standard member might be for their local community. Therefore, that investment can be reinvested into the policing budget. And I think so instead, yes, investing, keeping a PCC on, keeping that structure, however, investing in the police and crime commissioning boards and getting the funding out to communities that need it and projects that need it is the best approach. And I think at the moment there is some confusion over what a PCC does from a public perspective and perception. They cannot get involved in operational matters, so it's working in partnership with the constabulary and forces as to how funding can best support forces.
Can you bring your remarks to a close, Claire? You've used a lot of time.
Okay, so whilst I support the motion, I would say it needs to be reconsidered, the various lines that I have highlighted. And I think...
Thank you, Claire. Claire's a first-time speaker. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Well done, mate.
Can I ask Imogen Shepherd-Debay to stand by, and I call Kevin Chun to speak to the motion.
Conference, I speak to support the motion brought by my colleagues from London. This debate hits home for me as a council estate tenant in our capital. I know too well the fear of crime and how much we depend on a fast, responsive community police. But when I talk to my neighbours, they have a fear. They fear for their lives, they fear for their homes. And this really hit home this year in Islington, when we saw a 15-year-old stabbed and lost his life. Conference, this really matters because children on our streets in our capital are having their lives taken so young by the deliberate actions of other human beings choosing to kill them. That's something that should horrify all of us. But today we live in a society where children kill other children in our country. What's worse is that this could have been managed better if we had different priorities on what policing we had, and we had a metropolitan police and other police forces that worked for us. Conference, we need to deal with this problem, and that's why this motion is so important. We need to make sure that we have stop and search powers that are used targeted to try and deal with these problems, not used as a random blunt tool to try and capture the odd drug user outside a tube station. Conference, we know the state of police forces in our city have been made far worse by the poor management and bad choices made over the last 30 years by Labour and Tory politicians who have chased headlines in the Daily Mail rather than chase criminals off our streets. This is why we need to make this our issue. Crime is a Liberal Democrat issue. It is an invasion of freedom when someone else decides when your life will end without notice or invades your home. Conference, we must do this. I welcome this motion, and I also, as a disabled person, welcome the amendment as well, so we can get better treatment for people who are disabled, and we don't have the scandal as happened in Devon and Cornwall, where an autistic man died in police cells because they were not trained to handle that. Conference, thank you.
Kevin is also a first-time speaker. Thank you, Kevin.
Well done, Kevin.
Can I call Imogen Shepherd-Debay to speak and ask that Rob Blackie stands by? Thank you.
Good evening, Conference. I guess it is evening now, yes. I'm a local councillor for Wokingham Borough Council, which is considered to be a safe, low-crime area. However, we have experienced significant problems with what is considered just to be low-level crime. In Wokingham, we used to have a police station in our town, and uniformed police were often seen walking around. They were probably just getting their lunch, but that visual presence made our community feel safe, and problems such as shoplifting, bike thefts, and low-level crime were kept to a minimum. Now I get complaints from residents seeing shoplifters openly stealing from stores. With no apparent fear, burglaries and other thefts go uninvestigated, and residents are just given a crime number. We've had a significant spate of bicycle thefts, almost daily basis, but they're just not taken seriously, not investigated, and they're just given a crime number for insurance, and the police just don't investigate and just don't seem to care. On Fridays and Saturday nights, our town suffers from fighting, noise, vandalism, broken bottles in the early hours, and we seem to get no policing support or help for people to get home safely. Residents try and report people selling and taking drugs, but the police no longer seem to take care or take the time to investigate. We get noisy car meets racing around town in our car parks, frightening our residents and keeping them awake at night. All of these erode the confidence of our residents, and it affects their mental health and well-being. Conference, the police must have a duty to keep our community safe, and this is just not happening. Residents no longer feel safe in their communities. They can no longer go out at night. They cannot use their bicycles for fear of theft and are distressed by seeing things damaged or stolen, all eroding our community pride. My council is trying to help and has been stepping up by developing its own antisocial behaviour team. This team is picking up the work that used to be done by police, patrolling our parks and public places, engaging with our late-night venues. Our town council has even been paying for extra evening security after the bars close, but they do not have the powers to arrest people causing trouble. This is now an extra cost to our council taxpayers because we are having to do something which ultimately I feel is a stealth tax and sticking plaster for an underfunded policing, pushing frontline policing work onto local councils. Conference, trust in the police is at an all-time low. We need our police to return to community policing and be visible in our neighbourhoods. They should be part of our communities. This is where our funding should be placed, not funding unnecessary layers of police crime commissioners, which are expensive and show no real benefit to our communities. We need to fund our police service properly and give them the responsibility for keeping our communities safe. Thank you, and please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Imogen. I now ask Jackie Bell to stand by and Rob Blackie to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Here's what one of London's police officers told Louise Casey's review of standards and culture in the Metropolitan Police. If you look at our performance on rape and other serious sexual offences, the detection rate is so low, you may as well say it's legal in London. Just let that sink in. You may as well say it's legal in London. That is the legacy of 7 years with Sadiq Khan in charge of the Capital's Police. 7 years when rape convictions have plummeted. 7 years when the Met has too often known how to be a force, but has forgotten how to be a service. And yes, this is Sadiq's record to defend and no one else's. He is the London Police and Crime Commissioner. He appoints the Deputy Mayor for Policing. He runs the London Policing Board. When it comes to women's safety in the capital, the buck stops at City Hall. Now, up to 40% of rapes are by repeat offenders. So a failure to convict means a failure to prevent rapes and sexual assaults, a failure to prevent terrible crimes. And one key reason for the Met's pitiful conviction rate is that the officers investigating rapes are dealing with vastly more cases than they can possibly handle well. Now, following the Casey review, Sadiq has promised 565 more officers dedicated to rape and sexual assaults. So 6 months on, how is he doing? How many have been put into that role? Just 42. That means lines of inquiry unpursued. It means victims giving up. And it means cases that never make it to court. And yet, all the while, London police are wasting time and money searching people for cannabis. 100,000 stop and searches in the last year. 100,000 times our hard-working officers could have been doing something more useful. And from the start of next year, they'll be searching even more people as part of a bizarre crackdown on laughing gas. What an absurd, twisted set of priorities. If we're going to tackle rape and other serious sexual offences in London, we need the police focused on the crimes that really matter to Londoners. So please do support this motion, and then please come to London and join our campaign. Let's beat Sadiq Khan, and let's fix the Met. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I now ask Helen Maguire to stand by and call Jackie Bell to speak to the motion.
Conference. It's not just Westminster that's failing on policing. Just look to the Scottish scene. The SNP may blame Westminster for everything, but the creation of centralised Police Scotland was their choice, against Scottish Lib Dem warnings. Centralisation has had a major impact on smaller communities, particularly in rural areas. Dunbar and East Linton Ward, where I'm Area Partnership Chair, once had 3 active community officers. We now have 1 part-time. She can be moved to other parts of the county, or even Scotland if required, leaving no local cover. It can be difficult to report crime. People going to the police station, if it's open, may be told to email their concern. Calling 101 may be unsuccessful, or be put through to centralised call centres that don't know the area. Mistakes happen. A fatal accident inquiry, long called for by Willie Rennie, has just started into the deaths of Lamara Bell and Ian Yule on the M9 in 2015. Police Scotland admitted that an officer at Bilston Glen failed to pass on the initial report of the crash. When the couple were found 3 days later, it was too late to save them. Police Scotland have had to compensate the couple's children to the tune of £1 million. It can take time for reports to be followed up. The trail goes cold. Even calls for ongoing incidents like fire raising or youth climbing on a school roof can find no officer available to attend. We have a 20-mile-an-hour limit. It's not enforced and it's ignored. The community councils, of which I'm a member, bought cut-out cops. They're unused. The bikes we bought sit in a shed. Community officers did other work, attending community councils, our shared surgeries. They did preventative and diversion work, like bike and surfing projects for young people at risk, all ceased. Our SNP councillor, who works for the housing minister, denies cuts. She says officers are working differently. But we know the difference. We know that's wrong. Lack of officer visibility has led to lots of public confidence in the police. People say, why report? Nothing will be done. That leads to under-reporting of incidents. But effective reporting and recording would help the case for increased resources. Conference, it's urgent. If we are to renew public confidence in the police, that we must invest in community officers, the very root of preventing and responding to crime in our communities. Conference, please support the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
I now ask Fraser Graham to stand by and call Helen Maguire.
Good evening, Conference. I'm Helen Maguire, Parliamentary Candidate for Epsom and Ewell. I'm also a retired Royal Military Police officer. Our police force in the UK has been decimated of experience. Experienced police officers have been lost, and now we are seeing the results. So the other day, I attended something called Shop Watch in Epsom. This is a meeting that's put on by the local BID, the Business Improvement District, where managers and employees from local shops are invited to share their knowledge about recent crime. And it's also where the new private police force inform the shops of what they've been up to. Yes, you've got it right. In Epsom, in addition to the taxes that shops are already paying, they're actually paying for a private police force at the same time. This is a private undercover police force patrolling our streets and even making private prosecutions. Shoplifting got so bad in Epsom that they had to get the private cops in. Police simply weren't attending crimes. And the staff in the shops weren't able to do anything about the shoplifting because they were fearful of threats and violence. In addition to that, we've got limited understanding of the level of crime because the crimes are not being reported because the online systems for reporting simply don't work. So I welcome this policy conference, a return to community policing, because the increase in shoplifting locally in Epsom has been caused in part by the lack of visible police presence on our streets. This doesn't deter the shoplifters, and it leads to a lack of prosecutions. But it's not just shoplifting. In Surrey, police failed to attend 1,412 burglaries. That's just over 50%. 2,195 burglary cases were closed without even a suspect being identified, almost 80%. 4 out of 5 car thefts were left unsolved. And PCSOs in Surrey have been cut by 35, and they've been halved in Epsom. The government say they're tough on crime, but I just simply don't see this. And it's not as if the money isn't there. So in Surrey, the police budget for 22-23 was underspent by at least £7.9 million. That's enough to pay the entire 5.1% council tax increase that was imposed by the PCC for 2023-24. We need to enable and encourage proper community policing. Let's provide a guarantee that all burglaries will be attended to. Let's scrap the PCC and replace them with police boards, and let's invest in the police. And perhaps we need to digitise the paperwork. We need to make it easier for the crimes to be reported. Let's create a functioning police force. So please, Conference, support this policy and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I now ask Charlie Husted to stand by and call Fraser Graham.
Hello again, conference. I'll remark on the irony that yesterday was Bi-Visibility Day, yet today is the day that I've made my third speech in a day. When I arrived in Bournemouth Friday night, I got in quite late and wandered up to my accommodation in the dark, down some narrow dark streets. And it only dawned on me as I was doing that I happened to be wearing a t-shirt that my friend had bought me for my birthday, which said very loudly on the front, "Be gay, do crime." And it dawned on me that I was being very visibly queer whilst wandering down that street, and me personally, I didn't feel at risk. And I think that's because of my own privilege as quite a tall chap. I don't generally feel threatened by things like that, even though I have had experience myself of being subject to a verbal homophobic attack in the past. And in that case, the police did do their job. They found the person. We went to court. Had to go to court again, had to go to court a third time because of delays in the court system, but that did work. But I know friends who have suffered from those type of attacks who haven't been able to rely on the police, people who haven't felt comfortable to rely on our police as it currently is. I look at the worrying increase in homophobic and transphobic attacks recently, the recent attack outside the Two Brewers pub, the increasing prevalence of transphobic hate stickers and graffiti across our cities. And I get worried, conference. And I was initially a bit skeptical reading a motion thinking, oh, it's about increasing police numbers. And, you know, I have had worries about our police service, about are they really actually a service anymore? Are they a force? And I think we need to make sure they are a service. But having read this motion, and especially read the amendment, I think this is needed. We do need to return to our police being a service, and I welcome the words in the motion that specifically mention policing by consent, because we need to remember that. We are policed by consent. Please vote for this motion and vote for the amendment. Thank you, conference.
Thank you, Fraser. Can I ask Paul Kohler to stand by to summate the motion as a whole, and I call Charlie Hasted to speak to Amendment 1.
Hello, me again. So I am specifically speaking on the amendment. However, and I know FCC hate when you do this, so I'm really sorry, but I couldn't help but follow on from what Linda was saying. As a fellow detached youth worker about the needs to make sure that we are going in and intervening before crime happens. We've had a lot about shoplifting, but very little about why people shoplift. People shoplift food because they are hungry. They shoplift clothes because they don't have any, because we live in a cost of living crisis. And we need to make sure we're addressing that as well. But I specifically wanted to speak to the amendment because I'm already doing this work with the Metropolitan Police. So I'm a community engagement partner with them, which means that I help with training them in engaging with communities that have traditionally not had the best relationship with police. So as with Kathy's experience, I'm also autistic. I've also had issues with the police because of that, because I also go non-verbal. So explaining how my disabilities, how my conditions affect me, how the fact I'm trans affects the way that I interact with the police, how LGBT people in general feel about the police. So I'm also a member of the Lambeth local party, which is where we saw that attack outside the Two Brewers where the two men were stabbed. Brixton, we saw 2 gay men assaulted. We've had verbal assaults. It's on the increase. And I feel like the work that I do with the police, the work that my colleagues, other community engagement partners do with the police, is making a difference in their understanding of how to work with us, not just as witnesses, but as victims and even as perpetrators or suspected perpetrators of crime. So I absolutely support the amendment. I think it is vitally important that we carry on doing this work. And I know that the officers I've worked with value having that space where they can ask questions about things they don't understand, where they can be given that experience, where we can say to them, actually, it might be worth you learning some British Sign Language because you never know when you're going to use it. And then that way you won't arrest a deaf person for making the sign for deaf. which has happened because a police officer didn't know this sign and thought it was somebody giving them the V. That's happened. You know, this is vitally important, this amendment. It's vitally important to give our communities better police, better trained police who can understand our needs and our wants. And maybe, hopefully, we'll never be in a situation where we're looking at Child Q, another Sarah Everard, more people being attacked and not getting the support they need because of who they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. I now call Paul Kohler to summate the motion.
Good afternoon or good evening, conference. My name is Paul Kohler. I'm the parliamentary candidate in Wimbledon. Can I thank Caroline for bringing forward this important motion, in particular her comments on the Casey report. Can I also thank every speaker who's spoken this afternoon. I'd particularly like to thank Catherine Macy for sharing her harrowing story, and Charlie as well, and tabling and supporting this amendment to ensure the police are educated in protected characteristics. Clearly, we're in broad agreement that policing must change, both to keep our communities safe and ensure public trust is restored. And as Rob Blackie and Helen Maguire made clear, there's a long, long way to go. We obviously need more police officers on the beat, as Gideon Amos noted, and stationed in our neighbourhoods. That's why I took the Mayor of London to court and won my judicial review to force him to stop his closure of Wimbledon Police Station. And that's why I'm fighting to keep it open still. As Imogen Shepherd and Jackie Bell noted, we need police in the heart of our town centres and communities. But we must have the courage to change what isn't working and the imagination to embrace what will. Take police and crime commissioners, for example. Millions of pounds have been wasted on what looks like a Tory PR stunt that's done little to improve public trust, nor make the police more accountable or responsive to local needs. I do agree with Claire Tomlin. Policing has changed, which is why we've called for an online crime agency. But this motion does seek to scrap police and crime commissioners and replace them with police boards made up of councillors and local representatives, a far cheaper, more community-based alternative that will release funds to be invested in frontline policing. Police also need to do more for victims. The commission, reporting and prosecution of crime invariably relegates the victims to the margins. They must be brought into the heart of the process, both with practical measures, such as ensuring more crime scenes are attended by investigating officers, and radical ideas, such as rethinking what we mean by justice. Restorative justice, known as RJ, has an important part to play in that rethink. Under RJ, a victim and perpetrator are given the chance to address the crime together, outside the criminal process, something of which I have a personal experience. A few years ago, my family and I were the victims of a brutal attack to our home in Wimbledon. It changed our lives. And RJ played an important part in our recovery, as I will be discussing in a fringe meeting in a few minutes in Bayview Street after this debate. Now, my family was lucky, but I want every victim of crime to be given that chance by enshrining their right in law to be referred to RJ by the police. We similarly need to think creatively about how we ensure local police focus on what's more beneficial to their communities, like making youth diversion a statutory duty, as both Linda, Jack, and Charlie so powerfully argued. These are the kind of bold ideas we need to create the police force our communities deserve. And this motion is full of bold ideas. So, conference, I urge you to back this motion and the accompanying amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to everyone who's contributed to the debate. We're going to come now to two votes, the first of which is open for those who are voting online. The first vote will be on the amendment, and then we'll move to the motion as a whole. So could those who are in favour of Amendment 1 please raise your lanyards now? Thank you. And those who are against? Great. Just going to give it a few minutes for the online votes to come in. Sorry to delay you all from the next debate, which is the Standing Order Amendment on limiting the number of constitutional amendments, which I know will be an interesting debate. That amendment is overwhelmingly passed. Thank you. So we move now to the motion as a whole. Could those in favour of the motion please raise your lanyards? And those who are opposed? I see a couple opposed, but that's overwhelmingly carried in the hall. We will just wait for the online votes. And thank you from me. This is my first debate that I've chaired, and you've been very kind to me with no references back, no standing order suspensions, no complications, so I'm very appreciative. There is still time. I'd be very grateful if you did do that. That's overwhelmingly carried, so the motion passes as amended. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to my aide, Alison Rouse, and Tom Campion, who's the hall aide, and I hand over now to James Girling, who will chair the next session.
Hello, Conference. My name is James Girling. I'm the chair for this session. When I heard that there was a standing orders debate scheduled for 5:30 on a Sunday afternoon, I was intrigued. When I saw it was titled, Limiting the Number of Constitutional Amendments and Standing Order Amendments that can be discussed at any one conference, this had to be my debate. So I'm very, very pleased to have secured this chairing moment. So as you're leaving the hall, please, if you would be as quiet as you could. We have lost a lot of time in this debate, so we're going to do as much as we can to catch up. So we will have a more truncated debate than we originally intended or planned for you. Can I ask Gareth Epps, please, to stand by? And I now call Duncan Brack to move the motion.
Thanks very much, James. I can't understand why everybody's leaving at this point. This is our favourite topic, Standing Order Amendment. Conference, one of the most difficult tasks the Federal Conference Committee has is to select motions and amendments for the agenda out of the very large number that are submitted. This is always a really difficult balancing job. We try to create a mix of debates and set-piece speeches and reports and question sessions. We aim to choose motions on issues that are topical, that are salient, that party members care about, that will attract good media coverage, that will give opportunities to councillors and candidates to raise their profile, that are on topics where existing policies are out of date or on issues where we've never had policy before. And we try to take motions from as wide a range of submitting policy bodies as possible. The FPC, parliamentary spokespeople, local parties, ordinary party members, etc., etc. As you can imagine, this is never straightforward, and we always end up disappointing people whose motions we don't take. We can't avoid that, as we always have more motions submitted than there is time to take them. But there are two categories of motions that we cannot decline to put on the agenda: amendments to the Constitution and amendments to standing orders. They need to be in order, which means that they need to be clearly written, they make sense, they don't contradict other bits of the Constitution, and so on. But if they are in order, we have to put them on the agenda, no matter how peripheral they are, or whether we think they have any chance of passing, or whether the conference is an immediate pre-election event, or any other consideration. So at Spring Conference this year, for example, we allocated 30 minutes to a standing order amendment that attracted a tiny level of support, and another 30 minutes to a constitutional amendment that you decided to move next business on and didn't debate at all. Together, these two items, which very few people supported, meant that we had to omit to take out one debate on a substantial policy motion, or perhaps two on shorter ones. Last year, if the autumn conference hadn't been cancelled, we would have spent 2 hours and 20 minutes debating 3 constitutional amendments and 2 standing order amendments. So the purpose of the change we're asking you to make is to give your conference committee the power to limit the amount of time we spend debating these items at any one conference. It still keeps them in a special category. If we receive constitutional or standing order amendments that are in order, we will still be required to place up to 2 of them on an autumn conference agenda and 1 on the spring agenda. It's not an absolute cap either. We could table more if there are good reasons to do so. For example, if several amendments are submitted, which clearly have substantial support, or because they're needed to deal with problems that have come up. But this change will mean that we can avoid conference being obliged to spend significant amount of time debating such items regardless of how relevant they are, regardless of what other items we would like to place on the agenda, and regardless of what's happening in the outside world. For example, how near we are to an election. Now, I have no doubt that the speakers against will denounce our proposal as an unprincipled power grab by a bunch of power-crazed authoritarians. And they should make this case, because suspicion of those in authority is a core part of Liberals' DNA. But you don't have to agree with them. Come on, conference, this is the FCC we're talking about, not the federal board. We never rule out debating any issue forever. If we don't take a particular motion at one conference, or even at 2 in a row, if it's well written, there's a fair chance we'll take it at the 3rd. And if we do start behaving in the way that you don't like, you have many ways to tell us we're wrong. You can move a suspension of standing orders to introduce an item onto the agenda. You can reject the FCC's report. You can not vote for us when we stand for re-election. We are elected by you and we are accountable to you. All we are doing here is to ask you to give us the power to stop constitutional and standing order amendments swamping the agenda, because at the moment we have no way to prevent that at all. We will still be required to put some of those that are in order on the agenda, but not an unlimited number. This is a cap, not a ban. Please support motion F26.
Thank you, Duncan. And as if to underline that point, we have had a request for a reference back, which we will be taking at a point later in this the debate. So this is a proper moment, Gareth. So before I ask you to start off, could I please ask Jenny Rigg to stand by, and I now call Gareth Epps to speak against the motion.
If ever there was a joke pitched at a targeted audience, that was it. Well done, Duncan. Conference, I think we were all a bit frustrated that when in York, instead of talking to voters about issues that matter, we had an agenda that was comprised largely of policy papers and amendments to the Constitution and standing orders. However, nobody, not even the Federal Policy Committee, could foresee a global pandemic followed by the death of the monarch, leaving us without our sovereign gathering for so long. Please, that's not a reason to write another policy paper. Now, I have a good degree of trust in the judgment of Federal Conference Committee, though even in the 16 years I was on it, I wouldn't say it was infallible. And even if it were infallible, we as Liberals should be wary of the effects on our internal democracy of handing over power to an elected committee. We don't often need to amend our constitutional standing orders, but it's vital that this opportunity is kept open to all of us. Now, on conference, there is a problem that needs to be tackled. Those of you who are in York saw the moving of next business on a proposal to amend the Constitution that was massively out of kilter with our fundamental aims and values, which was why you voted in the way you did. And Nick and I spoke after that debate about how to tackle it. Conference, does this motion stop amendments to the Constitution or standing orders that are spurious, unclear, or out of line with our values? No, it doesn't. What it does is hand FCC a set of powers that is rarely, if ever, needed. FCC already has the power to merge or separate motions of constitutional amendments. This power would hand an FCC that might be more compliant with the party leadership the ability to block amendments it didn't like. Conference, it should be up for us, not the leadership, to decide these things. The party has a set of fundamental aims and values crystal clear in the preamble to our Constitution. If someone tries to amend our party rules in a way that trashes those values, conference, after York, I trust us to be the judge of what to do with that. And I look forward to a standing order amendment that might deal directly with that proposal. It's a pity that we haven't got that in front of us today. So, conference, I ask you to vote against this amendment standing orders.
Thank you, Gareth. Can I ask Michael Berwick-Gooding, please, to stand by, and I call Jenny Rigg from Calderdale to speak in favour of the motion.
Good afternoon, conference. Those of you who know me are probably surprised to see me speaking in favour of this motion. You might think that this is me having my Shirley Williams on the awful NHS motion moment. You all know I've been calling for a constitutional convention for years, so why would I be in favour of limiting the number of constitutional amendments? You might very well shake your head and think, bloody hell, Jenny's sold out. She's even in agreement with our beloved President Mark Pack. And that never happens. Conference, I've been on FCC for a long time now, and I'll admit that I have reluctantly become part of the establishment. I'm on the Constitutional and Standing Orders Working Group, which, despite what our illustrious chair says, is definitely the most fun committee in the party. But that doesn't mean that I've lost my rebellious roots. You can probably see my roots even from the back of the hall. I do still think we should have a constitutional convention. I think there's a lot of our constitution that needs sorting out, updating, making clearer, making fit for the century we're in now and not the century we were in when it was written. But I recognise that I'm in the minority. Can you please, those of you in the hall, put your hands up if you have honestly actually read the entire Constitution? Not just the preamble, the lot of it. Well, I can see a few, so those of you that have your hands up, can you keep them up if you would rather have long, navel-gazing technical debates on the minutiae of the Constitution, or rather than nice, meaty policy debates that you can go out and campaign on and use to smash the Tories? Now, I'm going to put my hand up at that point because I really would rather do that, but I see most of the people here have put their hands down. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going around that this is some sort of sinister power grab by the FCC. It's really not. If we have a constitutional amendment submitted and it's in order, we have to take it no matter how bonkers it is. Since I have been a member of the party, to my knowledge, there have been 3 move to next business procedural motions. Every single one of them was on a constitutional amendment that conference did not want. Because FCC currently has to accept constitutional amendments, even if we know for a solid fact that conference is going to hate them, that situation is going to continue. All this motion seeks to do is make conference better for you guys. More meaty policy motions, less procedural shenanigans, to use a phrase I've got in trouble for before. Please vote in favour of this motion, but also do join me if you are a fellow constitutional geek in pushing for a constitutional convention, so we can all go and sort out all the stuff that needs sorting out without boring the whole rest of conference with it. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Jenny. Can I ask Chloe Hutchinson, please, to stand by? And I now call Michael Berwick-Gooding from Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you. I had hoped that this standing order amendment could be amended, so I put in an amendment to amend it, but it was rejected. The reason is I wasn't really keen on the wording because I thought it could be misunderstood. And I read it twice, and I could interpret it 2 different ways. The way I wanted to read it was that you could have 2 constitutional amendments and 2 standing order constitutional amendments